The world is standing at the edge of a financial earthquake. For decades, the United States dollar has not just been a currency, it has been a weapon, a tool of dominance, and the foundation of America's superpower status. From oil trade to global reserves, the dollar has been the lifeline of international finance. But today, something extraordinary is happening. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and now Saudi Arabia, are pushing a gold-backed currency that could challenge the dollar's throne. The question now is simple. Is this the beginning of the end for the American dollar and with it American global power? The story of the dollar's dominance begins after World War II. In 1944, the Bretton Woods Agreement made the US dollar the world's reserve currency, pegged to gold at $35 an ounce. Every nation's currency linked to the dollar, and every dollar linked to gold. America held 3/4 of the world's gold reserves, making the dollar as good as gold. For decades, this system gave Washington unmatched influence. But in 1971, President Richard Nixon shocked the world. With America printing money for wars and welfare, its gold reserves couldn't keep up. Nixon abandoned the gold standard. From that day on, the dollar was backed by nothing but trust and military might. The move should have destroyed the dollar, but America had a backup plan, the Petrodollar. In the 1970s, Washington struck a secret deal with Saudi Arabia. Every barrel of oil sold by the kingdom would be priced in US dollars. Soon, every OPEC nation followed. If you wanted oil, you needed dollars. This forced every country in the world to hold dollars in reserve, making the greenback indispensable. The petrodollar was born, and it secured American dominance for the next half-century. But the world has changed. The rise of China, the resurgence of Russia, the independence of India, and the growing power of BRICS have shattered America's monopoly. These nations are tired of living under Washington's financial dictatorship. They are tired of sanctions, weaponized banking systems, and a dollar that can be printed endlessly by the Federal Reserve while the rest of the world suffers inflation. The idea of a gold-backed BRICS currency isn't just financial, it is political warfare against U.S. hegemony. Gold has always been humanity's ultimate money. Unlike paper, it cannot be printed. Unlike digital currencies, it cannot be hacked. Unlike the dollar, it cannot be sanctioned. For centuries, empires rose and fell, but gold remained the constant store of value. When the U.S. abandoned the gold standard, it gave itself the freedom to print trillions, but it also planted the seeds of its decline. Today, BRICS nations hold massive gold reserves. Russia and China have been quietly stockpiling gold for years. India is one of the world's largest gold consumers. South Africa is a gold-rich nation. Together, they form a bloc powerful enough to anchor a new currency in real assets rather than paper promises. The implications of a gold-backed BRICS currency are staggering. Imagine a world where oil from Saudi Arabia is sold in gold-backed BRICS currency, where Russia's energy exports bypass the dollar, where China's manufacturing supply chain settles trade in yuan and gold, and where India's imports of oil, food, and raw materials are no longer tied to the Federal Reserve's policies. The US dollar would face its first true challenger in decades. This isn't about replacing the dollar overnight. It's about creating an alternative. And alternatives weaken monopoly. For Washington, this is a nightmare. The dollar's power isn't just about economics. It's about control. America can sanction nations by cutting them off from the dollar system. It can freeze assets, block transactions, and cripple economies. But a gold-backed BRICS currency would give nations an escape hatch. Countries under U.S. sanctions like Russia, Iran, and Venezuela could simply bypass the dollar system altogether. Even allies frustrated by American overreach may slowly drift towards the new bloc. Once trust in the dollar cracks, confidence collapses. And confidence is the only thing keeping fiat money alive. Some analysts argue that a BRICS gold currency could never succeed. They say the dollar is too entrenched, that gold is too rigid for modern trade, that BRICS nations are too divided to pull it off. But these same arguments were made decades ago when people doubted China's rise. when they laughed at India's economy, when they thought Russia would collapse after the Cold War. Yet here we are. History shows us that every empire believes its power is permanent, until the day it isn't. If BRICS launches a gold-backed system, the first industries to feel the impact will be oil, gas, and commodities. Energy is the backbone of trade, and whoever controls the pricing system controls the future. Saudi Arabia's growing ties with China and India are a warning sign for Washington. For the first time in 50 years, Riyadh is openly selling oil in currencies other than the dollar. Once the petrodollar breaks, the dominoes fall quickly. Nations will ask, why should we trade in paper dollars when we can trade in currency backed by gold? The second shockwave will hit the U.S. financial system. The Federal Reserve thrives on the dollar's status as the global reserve. It allows Washington to print trillions without hyperinflation because other nations absorb the excess dollars as reserves. But if demand for the dollar falls, America will face the inflation it has exported to the world for decades. Trillions of dollars could flow back into the U.S., crushing its economy, weakening its military funding, and triggering political chaos. Empires fall not when they are defeated in war, but when their financial foundation collapses. But let us not mistake this as just an economic event. This is a geopolitical revolution. A BRICS gold currency would represent the global South's rebellion against Western dominance. It would unite Asia, Africa, and Latin America in a financial bloc independent of Washington and Brussels. It would mean that countries like India, which once relied on Western institutions, now have a seat at a new table. It would mean that Russia, long isolated by sanctions, finds new life in trade. It would mean that China, the manufacturing giant, finally wields financial power equal to its economic weight. And it would mean that America faces the same fate as Britain before it, watching its empire of money crumble piece by piece. The average person may wonder, how does this affect me? The answer is simple. If you live in America, it could mean higher prices, weaker savings, and political unrest as the dollar loses value. If you live in Asia, Africa, or Latin America, it could mean more independence from Washington's policies. For oil-importing nations like India, it could mean cheaper energy deals. For countries rich in resources like Africa, it could mean fairer trade. The shift will not be smooth, but it could be historic. Of course, the U.S. will not sit quietly as its dollar dominance is threatened. Expect Washington to strike back with pressure campaigns, sanctions, diplomatic deals, and possibly even wars. America's military-industrial complex thrives on global dominance, and a world without dollar supremacy is a world where Washington has less control. But history shows us that when empires fight to protect dying systems, they only accelerate their fall. Rome taxed its people into rebellion. Britain clung to colonies it could not control. The Soviet Union poured money into an arms race it could not afford. America may now be on the same path, printing dollars to defend a dollar system that is already cracking. As we look to the future, one thing is clear. The age of unchallenged American financial power is ending. The BRICS gold currency may not kill the dollar overnight, but it represents the birth of a new order. The world is moving towards multipolarity, towards shared power, towards currencies backed by real value instead of promises. Whether the BRICS succeed or fail, the very fact that they are challenging the dollar means the illusion of permanence is shattered, and once the illusion breaks, history changes forever. So is this the end of the US dollar? Not today, not tomorrow, but the countdown has begun. The dollar is no longer untouchable, no longer sacred, no longer the only game in town. The rise of BRICS, the return of gold, the rebellion of nations. These are the signs of a world in transition. America once said the dollar was as good as gold. Today, BRICS is saying gold is better than the dollar, and that single shift could redefine the next century.